We got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we got the next discussion video talking about Andor. We got episode 4 this past week, so we are here to talk to you about the episode itself, what happened, and also our thoughts on the episode. This week, we got Tony going over the overview with us, so we will have spoilers going forward. So, Tony, what happened this week?
Well, first of all, I want to point out my background here. I did this both because Star Wars and in honor of that space shuttle thing that we sent into space to try to knock the asteroid out of its direction. So there you go. Topical.
They're potatoes, right?
What?
They're potatoes, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. If you know, you know. Okay. So kind of like what we talked about last week, in me describing this episode, if you're kind of uninitiated to the show, you might be like, well, that doesn't sound like too terribly exciting, because this is the type of show that, in my opinion at least, the goodness in it is in the detail and in the dialogue and all that sort of thing, and it would be tedious and not anticlimactic to go through all of that stuff. So but we're still going to recap it, and you need to go watch it. Star Wars fan or not, honestly. So the bulk of this episode is setting up for an eventual heist by this rebel cell, basically. So the episode starts, and it doesn't appear to have been a time jump. It seems like it picked up right after the third episode, which is fine. I was expecting more of a time jump. Maybe I misunderstood what the structure of the show was, but anyway, doesn't matter. So we start out with Andor and Luthen, flying away, and Luthen basically tells Andor that he knows basically all about him and how great he is and why he wanted him and all that stuff. And Andor, naturally, because character arc, is reluctant and he's very cynical of a rebellion and all that stuff. He's just like, hey, I'm just trying to do my own thing and find my sister, whatever. So they kind of go back and forth for a little bit, and then they land on this planet, and I can't remember what it's called, but they shot it in the Scottish countryside. So it's lots of hills and grasslands and all that stuff. Basically Luthen drops Andor off essentially with this rebel group. It's not the full-fledged, rebel alliance yet. It's just this rebel cell, saying that, hey, and then Luthen was like talking to the leader of this rebel cell and was like, hey, I found this dude. He should be involved in this. And she was like, oh, I don't know. He's a new guy. Like, he's not part of our inner circle. It's kind of dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, I vouch for him. He's fine. It's fine. So eventually, Luthen convinces her to take Andor. So Andor goes with them. And then the Andor stuff is basically him talking to the various people of the group, mainly the leader. And the leader kind of recaps what has happened on that planet. It was basically, because historical allegory, it was a planet kind of with this sort of mystic indigenous culture that was pushed out of their land and kind of eradicated by the Empire, again, because Star Wars, historical allegory, all that stuff. And then she eventually brings them to the group. The group is kind of like, they're disgruntled, obviously, and they question everything. But by the end of it, it seems that, things are relatively good. And the heist they're pulling off, by the way, is they are stealing a garrison's worth of payroll for the not only to hit the Empire in their wallets, but I'm sure they could use some money as well. So that's kind of that part of the show. So after Luthen drops Andor off, he goes to Coruscant, and we find out that he leads kind of this double life as this antique dealer. And the scene where he kind of gets in the zone is I thought that was an incredible scene showing his acting chops. So so he's in his store, I guess, and Mon Mothma comes in, and obviously they act like, you know, she's a customer, and oh, look at all this cool stuff I got, whatever. And the other store worker kind of distracts her driver, who's a new driver. They make a point to emphasize that. Eventually, under the lie of Luthen being like, "Oh, I got something really good for you in the back," they go to the back, and then they talk about like rebellion stuff. Apparently, um, the Empire's starting to get suspicious, and it's getting harder for people within the Empire to kind of fund these rebellions, you know, kind of on the side. And Luthen's like, you know, I'm trying, I got something in the works, yada yada. And then Mon Mothma gets back to her house, and she finds out that she is hosting a dinner for a lot of the Imperial higher ups, and that kind of concludes that part of the episode. One last thing. As of right now, it doesn't seem like a huge thing. I'm sure it'll play up later, but there is an Imperial. There's these characters that are in like basically the Empire CIA, essentially, intelligence gathering agency, and one of them is investigating the mishap of that happened at the first three episodes, but really what the big action sequence at the end of the third episode. And they're kind of investigating that, and there's some like inner office arguments between different departments. You know, like, oh, this is my jurisdiction. Oh, but this happened, so it means it's my jurisdiction. Yada yada yada. And the leader of the agency is trying to, you know, keep them on the straight and narrow, that sort of thing. So I'm sure that will build on it later. But I think that's pretty much it. It was you know, setting a lot of stuff up. It set up the heist. It set up Luthen's double life. It set up the Empire's reaction to the first three episodes. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It kind of ended with Andor being like, "All right, let's do it," and then the credits roll.
Yeah, so we might actually get, you know, a fairly action-packed episode for next week. The only thing that I want to add is not necessarily like big story element, at least not that I know yet. Sarah and I were talking, and you know, last week I didn't have the names pulled up, so I pulled up the character names, so I had a whole list of them, and they associate like pictures with the names, and I scrolled down a little bit, and Sarah had recognized one of the names, Clem. That was the name that Andor told the group that that's what his name was, not Cassian. And that person is, I don't know if they were married, but Marva, it was who she was with when they picked up Andor as a child.
Yes.
That guy.
His adoptive father.
Yeah, I did not pick up on that was his name. So, yeah, I don't know if that's going to play out. Like if maybe somebody knows who Clem is and is like, this is not that guy. But we'll see what happens with that. I thought that was kind of interesting that he gave, like you said, his adoptive father's name as his own name. So some of our thoughts on the episode, I'll give mine first. I thought it fell kind of in line with the previous three as far as, you know, it's got a lot of exposition. I was really hoping to see something with the heist in this episode, but ultimately it was pretty much just all set up to the heist, and then next episode we'll probably just dive right into it. Some of the things that I really liked about the episode, one, I like seeing the different aspects of Coruscant. I know something that Disney slash Lucasfilm, they have alluded to being able to show us more and more of like the underbellies of Coruscant. They aren't quite to the underworld, I don't think, yet. But it's nice to see some of these different components to it with the antique shop that we got to see. I also liked a little bit more of the interaction between Cassian and Luthen in the beginning of the episode. Luthen has like this crystal he was talking about, so that kind of has a little more like Star Wars lore to add into there because he was talking about what it was. And he had said it's worth like 50,000 credits or something. Like, don't take any less than that because well, Cassian ultimately is going to get a cut of the money that they steal. So he's saying, trust me, this is worth at least this much, and trust us. We're good to our word, kind of a thing. So I like that. I'd say my cons, I wouldn't really call them like bad things about the episode, but it's very reminiscent of the previous episodes as well. It's a lot of exposition. There wasn't a whole lot of action or things that made me feel like they were in danger. It was a lot of just, like you said, building more and more up to where we're heading. I really hope we get something solid in the next episode with a little more conflict and whatnot. But that's kind of what I liked, and I wouldn't really say dislike. I would just say
just observations.
Yeah, observations. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
There wasn't really anything I disliked about the episode. I think it was just fine. Sarah?
I really struggled with this one just to follow what was happening.
It was every like 5 or 10 minutes I was pausing. I was like, he just said this. Are you listening?
I was trying to pay attention, but there was just so much of like, maybe it's just that I don't have as much Star Wars background as you, so a lot of these words are unfamiliar. Whether it be planets or people's names or different parts of the Empire, different sector names or something, I don't know.
I will say these planet things going on is starting to become a pet peeve of mine. Like every show has a different planet, and it's like, how big is this galaxy? We are really starting to flush it out, but keep going.
Endless.
Yeah, apparently.
It just, when you struggle that hard to understand what's even going on, it makes it really hard to enjoy. What I can say that I thought was cool, I guess, would be the antique shop, if you will, just because it was neat to see whatever they thought was cool or rare. We haven't really seen something like that before, except for like, like a swap parts shop or like a droid shop or something that's, not anything of value. That's probably about it for my list.
I will say that the internet, if anything from this episode, the internet is buzzing about the antique shop. If you haven't heard yet, and while they're walking around the antique shop, there's like a armor set in the background, and a lot of people are wondering if that has to do like just a homage, maybe not necessarily meaning that he is part of the show or lore currently, but there is an armor set in the background of the antique shop that is very reminiscent of Starkiller's armor when he turned to the dark side, like when he had his full-fledged armor. If you don't know what that looks like, you can see it on the Ultimate Sith edition of the video game cover, the Steelbook. It's part of the DLC. It wasn't part of the main game. Tony, what do you think?
I loved it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had one last thing to say, which is that I'm really excited for next week because I think next week there's actually going to finally be some action. So
there's action in episode 3.
There was. Well, to be fair, there was.
Compared to this week, I think next week will be more eventful. That's what I'm trying to get at. So,
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm continuing my love of the show. I thought it was spectacular. Not to sound as gushy about it as I was last week. And these aren't necessarily criticisms, they're just more observations, but this was a bit more of a exposition heavy, setup heavy episode. That didn't necessarily bother me, just because me personally, my subjective opinion, um, I think the writing and the performances really carry, like being an exposition heavy episode, setup heavy episodes. Luckily the performances and the writing can kind of still keep me interested in that way. Like I'm still interested in the interactions and the dialogue and all that stuff. And I will say honestly, to Sarah's point, there were a couple moments, even for me, as a lifelong Star Wars fan, that I was like, wait, what? What did they just say? What were those words that they just said? What were those nerdy Star Wars words they just threw out? And I had to actually like rewind it and be like, what did they say? And then I listened again. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Especially when Luthen and Andor were talking in the ship, and Andor like rattled off the different rebel cells that were already active, like Saw Gerrera and a couple other ones. He said it so fast that I'm like, wait, what? So I had to rewind it and listen to it again. So yeah, I don't blame you, honestly. Like even for me, there were a couple moments where I had to listen to it again. But like I said, I still love it. The writing in this show is just incredible, and like the performances too. My goodness, like that whole sequence where Luthen was getting set up in his second life, and he did the whole like thing in the mirror. I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, that's like incredible acting right there. Like he just flipped the switch, and he was like a completely different person. So that was great. You know, so I listen to a lot of movie pundits. I'm sure for any of you that have been listening to this YouTube channel for a long time, you're not shocked. I'm publicly a very big movie fan. And I was listening to one of them the other day, and I heard an explanation of why I think I love this show so much. And it was I think it was in the first episode, where this show in general does an incredible job of following the cardinal rule of screenwriting, which is to show, not tell. And this show does a lot of showing and not telling, and I think that's why I'm so connected with it. So, like for example, in episode one, where the cadet guy that was the the younger guy that was investigating everything, that went back to his mom in this episode, when he was standing before I guess like the police chief, for lack of a better way to say it, and he was kind of like standing at attention, and the chief was like, did you do something with your uniform? And he's like, oh yeah, I did some tailoring, I did this and I did that, whatever. Instantly, that tells me every single thing I need to know about that character. That explains his character perfectly. No need to spend any more time on it. I got it. I got what he's about, all that stuff. Move on to other things. So that's like showing, not telling. And I think that's why I'm enjoying the show so much. At least one of the reasons, is because I feel so connected with what's happening. Like I need to watch, like I need to actually watch it, and they're not just like spoon feeding me everything. And another thing I really liked, another moment that really, sorry, now I'm rambling, but another moment that really stood out for me was when Luthen was talking to the rebel leader and trying to convince her to take Andor onto the team. He started out with a very nice approach of like, oh, it'll be fine, just take him, just take him. And then as the conversation was going, then he got progressively angrier and angrier, to eventually yelling at her to be like, no, like there's too much riding on this, you need to take him. And like for me, it's like it's that those moments that carry the show, like those performances and that writing. Because when he does that, I feel the stakes. You know what I mean? Like I feel the stakes in this operation when he's talking to Mon Mothma. I feel the stakes. Just his performance just carries that of like, oh, I get it. He's stressed, so I'm stressed. So yeah, I just, even in a exposition setup heavy episode, the writing and the performances. I'm still hooked on this show. I love it. Okay, I'm going to say this. I might even like this show better than Mandalorian, but we'll see. The jury's still out. So there you go. I'm done for now.
So when you were talking about the scene where the guy Luthen put on, his other like double agent outfit doing the acting thing, do you think the Palpatine does that when he goes between different shots?
Probably. Like in the prequels, you mean?
Yeah.
Probably.
Kind of reminded me of his character a little bit when you were talking about him, just the double crossing, and it makes me wonder if this dude has any other motives.
Maybe.
Yeah. Did you have any other thoughts that popped up?
It's a bold statement you said, Tony.
Well, jury's still out. Jury's still out. I am very much enjoying this show.
I believe it's a show where you shouldn't give up yet. I think there's.
I never have.
No, I'm talking to the audience more or less.
And me.
But like I said last week, to me, it doesn't feel what Star Wars has been currently. So I feel like there is that bit of jet lag to it. But I mean, even IMDb kind of confirmed that, there's other seasons coming out, because they said that Cassian is in 24 episodes. So Disney has faith in this show. I think we should have a little bit more faith too, to a point, and just kind of see where this one goes. I wouldn't write it off until probably the end of season 1 if you want to make that choice. I remember seeing concept art and seeing Imperial Guards and stuff, and so I'm curious to see, where does that go? We haven't seen that yet, so I think there's a lot more to dive into. I feel like they really enjoyed this building of exposition, and even though it's a lot of new stuff right now, I feel like they're gonna have to flush out some of the other stuff as well. Like, what new things are we going to learn about the Empire? That's my big question. We have this new security group that we learned a bit about, but I'm sure there's tons of other things that we can explore of what's happening with this big transition period of when the Emperor declared that this is now a galactic empire, and how is he changing things in the Senate? Because clearly, I want to say they talked about the Republic or the Senate at some point in A New Hope. So, it wasn't purely just the Emperor being a dictator. There had to be some form of political system in there that I like to see more of. And I'm kind of hoping we get to see the interactions between the Empire and what used to be the Republic in that political sense too.
Well, there was. I feel like it's been highlighted in several Star Wars projects of like the Imperial Senate as kind of a pseudo democratic institution. You know what I mean? Like it's technically a Senate, but it's not. They don't actually have a lot of power.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess more or less like seeing the Emperor talk to these people and seeing how are they reacting to this, because when he announced that they were going to become a galactic empire in episode 3, everybody was clapping. Well, not everybody, I should say, but the grand majority of people were clapping. And so, now that some of this stuff has actually, been planted and they're starting to see how the empire is flushing out, what are their reactions to how he is running things? How, like, when he speaks, do they still have that clapping motive, or are more people starting to, dissolve? And
that would be fascinating to explore. I agree.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping out of this show.
Yeah, that would be good. I thought of one more thing as you were talking of this show being different than other Star Wars shows. I completely agree. I don't think that, like, from a technical standpoint, like cinematography and sound design and all that stuff, it's not handled like a normal Star Wars show. Like this show is shot differently than the Mandalorian
Hmm.
and Boba Fett and Obi-Wan was. Like just the what when I really realized that was again the scene where Luthen was changing his identity. That was just a phenomenal scene. But when the camera like panned around his head as he was like putting on his wig, I was like, I have never seen that shot before in any other Star Wars project. So like that, it's just like I said, cinematography and all that stuff is handled completely different, and maybe that's not vibing with some people, but for me, I find it absolutely fascinating, and that's probably another thing that keeps me hooked on this show is just seeing all the differences in this show compared to other Star Wars shows and movies, frankly.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably also my, I wouldn't say anxieties about the show, but like my feeling of uncertainty of how this show is it probably plays into that too, of how they're actually showing the show. Um, like we said, there's a lot of things that are actually different feeling about it, and so uh, it could be a very good thing, if the audience get used to this kind of a thing, and we can produce other shows like this. I feel like once people get their toes wet and they dive in, maybe it'll be a little more. I don't know if accepted is the word, but
It,
open
it
minded.
feels it feels more like an HBO show,
Yeah,
honestly, compared to like a normal Disney Plus show.
yeah, I
And
would
I mean,
agree
to
with
me,
that.
I like that, but I guess maybe other people that won't work.
Right. Cool. Well, I think anything else between all three of us? Feeling pretty good about this episode. So we're looking forward to the next episode. Hopefully we get to see that heist. I don't know why we wouldn't, but I'm looking forward to it. And just seeing what happens. Like, where are they stealing this money from? Are they going to get into the heart of the empire? Are they going to find something that they aren't, supposed to see? I think there's a lot of good opportunities with what could happen. Maybe that,
Will he find his sister?
yeah, will he find his sister? That'd be interesting.
That would be kind of lame if they just dropped that plot point.
Tony says no. Wait for the end. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna wrap up this video. We talked about this week's episode. There's only one each week going on from now on, as far as we know. So look forward to next week's discussion as well on episode 5. If you enjoyed this type of video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop us a like, drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts about the episode. Where do you fall in line with our 3 points of views? I still think we're kind of the love it, middle, not so love it across the spectrum. So let us know your thoughts. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.